Hi there, and thank you for clicking on my video. We're going to be talking a bit about Nidus, the Hama, the Pox, and the hirudo today. Um, Honestly, this video is more because I got, bothered a little bit because I just had a conversation with another LR2, very experienced player, and they were pretty convinced that Nidus sucks. Um, so we're going to discuss his builds. Because he has a couple of really juicy ones, and there's also some interactions that are to be aware of. We're going to also, because it was requested, um, the Hama. So I got a build for that. Also got a Riven for it. So we'll discuss things to look for. And just in terms of like a themed build, I have always been incredibly impressed with the infested style weapons in this game. Um, Now, obviously, instead of using the Hama, you would try to use something like a Proboscis Cernos. But the Hama has got multiplicative Galv stacks on it, so it does damage. So let's discuss a couple of the basic builds. We'll start out with the comfy build, and then we'll talk about like min-maxing a bit, because there are a couple things to consider. And then we'll also talk about buffer Nidus, particularly because it's a very important build for min-maxing. And we'll also talk about the speed clearing build with Nidus, where you actually survive based on casting. This is going to be a no Archon Shard build. Basically, you need one casting speed shard. He doesn't even need it to begin with, but just trying out some shards on him. Just up 25%. Casting speed feels pretty good on him, not gonna lie. Um, if you've been looking at the buffs, you'll notice I got an invigoration, 100% duration, and 1,000 health. A very Nidus-like buff. So obviously he's sitting pretty good, and I'm probably going to use this guy for the week. It's like it's the purpose of the invigorations. Um, so let's talk about Nidus. We'll talk about his abilities, because Nidus is a very, very synergy heavy frame. And the goal of Nidus, in terms of like the quote unquote proper build, is to basically be impossible to get off of a location. So, in terms of like your survival runs, maybe even your mobile defenses, I've even had some luck with him in terms of like cascade runs. I haven't done a cap run with him, but I enjoyed it enough. I'm probably gonna do one with him. Because the stacks, the issue is the stacks, and maybe it's a modding issue. But there is a augment mod that literally got buffed and literally fixes the issue. So this is a very expensive build. This is not the one I'm recommending to you. But this is the build I'm going to be using. As you can see, we got our 255 duration. But this is the build that you would use for your general mission running. And Prime Sure-Footed is a flex slot. You're going to need an augment forma. But in place of the triple Umbra, Archon Intensify would replace this. And you just do a standard Steel Fiber Vitality because of the way his health works for a very comfy build. Obviously, it's not going to be as strong as the triple Umbra, but if you're thinking about doing a triple Umbra build, Nidus is a candidate. He abuses the shit out of this set. So food for thought in terms of that, because Umbrals are kind of a meme in terms of like Warframe mod slots, with very few exceptions. but Nidus is probably the strongest candidate for a 3 Umbral build, and actually using your Umbral mods, or your Umbral Forma, to get Umbral mods on him, because he uses every single one of these stats. He's a health tank, he's incredibly tanky, and he has an incredibly high effective health. And you can scale him all the way up to level cap. So if you're having trouble keeping Nidus alive, hopefully this video is going to help you out. So the base build is health, armor, power strength, ideally an augment mod, but obviously if you don't have one, you can't use one, right? But I would recommend getting Insatiable. It makes Nidus doing level cap content. You could do your taxes while playing Nidus and defend a point. A little bit of duration and a little bit of range, and Nidus can stay alive. Adaptation is technically not even needed, and eventually at like higher levels, it does nothing. So this is as tanky as this guy is with 1200 armor, 2800 health. Eventually adaptation isn't going to do anything, but it's going to make me damn near invincible at lower levels, and that includes Steel Path, not Star Chart stuff. Nidus can face tank Steel Path. So what's the purpose of Nidus in terms of overarching goal of Nidus? Is he's not particularly a damage frame. Like, he's not an AoE nuke. He can do damage with his 1, especially with the augment, with Abundant Mutation. Allows his 1 to do incredible amounts of damage, especially with how free armor strip is. You can kill level cap with him in a straight line, especially if you helminth on like Terrify or something. There goes the enemy armor. You hit him with an Abundant Mutation. It's like 400,000 raw damage. They're dead in 1 or 2 casts. They're almost always dead if you have an enemy linked and they get hit with both 1s coming out. The enemy's practically dead. So Nidus has damage. Nidus has tank. He has great energy economy, especially with Hunter Adrenaline, because only 2 of his abilities use energy. So what's the problem with Nidus for the average player? Is getting stacks. Okay? Nidus without stacks is literally a kitten. He's not tanky, he's not... he can get 1 shot. Right? Nice and easy, he blows up. But, like, the Thrax 1-shot him, and that's part of the issue. So let's get rid of these guys. They're gone. Nice and easy. Alright, here we are. But if we do our tanky boys where we can actually see them, you'll find these guys aren't very tanky. Link up, hit our 4. And our tank is holding already. Just from Grace, from the health recovery from our 4, we're able to face tank most of these. And one of the things that helps is the maggots from our 4 provide something else for the enemy to shoot at. So we have our 2. Essentially can sort of be considered damage reduction, if you will, because the enemies that are in this are obviously not shooting us. But obviously that's not like true damage reduction, right? But if an enemy can't hit you, you're invincible. So how do we abuse this? Well, range doesn't affect the area of the 4. you can group, and you need enough range, ideally, if you are looking for a measurement to hit, is you need to hit, I think it's 30 or 32 meters with your 2, which is a tall order. Overextend isn't going to get you there. Overextend and stretch isn't going to get you there. But if you run triple range on Nidus with the 2 augment, you can readily CC an entire tile set. And the reason why it's important is if you look at these guys running around, you see he's still backing up. Let's take a look at that guy. 38, but he's not shooting me. Hold on. There we go. 38, but he's not shooting me. Is the enemies actually start to back away from you? As they'll run up to you, shoot you, and then back away, right? So we need enough range that can grab most of these guys. Especially if we're trying to keep our kill rate up. But the point of Nidus is to be basically unkillable. And how he survives is on the iframes from his passive. So you saw we stacked it pretty quickly. Let's kill these guys. And we'll stand in this. We'll get... Hopefully they can kill us. Yep, I'm in my core. Okay, here we go. Slowly getting whittled down. Alright, so we got 5 seconds. And we lose 15 stacks. But you see, because we have our 4 up, the maggots hitting enemies with AoEs is actually causing us to gain stacks faster than we lose them. And because the maggots are providing something else for the enemy to shoot at, we're not getting shot with the entire, you know, all of the guns of the enemy. So it layers a little bit. So you spawn things for the enemy to shoot at. You have innate health regen, you have arcane grace, arcane guardian. This is all well and good. But the point of Nidus is to stand on this carpet, CC stuff, and not die, which makes him incredibly potent for level caps. Because if you can stand on your carpet, you can gain, and we'll let him kill us again, you can gain stacks faster than you die, and faster than your passive consumes stacks just by being on your carpet with the insatiable augment. Especially now that the chance of gaining stacks scales with power strength. So you can even get 2, if not 3 stacks if you're running enough power strength with Nidus per instance of damage. So where it becomes important is, say these enemies are grouped like this, right? And you see all of the instance of damage. I gained a stack from that. But if we group them, I'm hitting them twice as many, and I can go from 0 to 100 in like 2 hits. And let me show that. Get rid of the stacks. Alright, stacks are gone. Alright, so just from those 2 hits, I'm at 28. And now I'm at 83. And now I'm capped. Just that quick. 2 hits from my, or 3 hits from my 1 is quick enough to cap my stacks. And it's because of the augment. If you do it without the augment, it can, honestly, it can be something you have to pay attention to. But because of this, it's literally nothing. Because one of the other things that causes you to gain stacks also, and it's part of the reason why you run stretch. I've noticed when playing Nidus that if you run no range and try to use this for something else, the grab range isn't enough for wider tile sets to readily keep your kill count up. It's a feel. Obviously, there's an equation with how many enemies you can grab, how fast you can group them. You kill enemies faster by having more of them in one spot. Take a weapon with good follow through, you know what I'm saying? But for the wider tile sets, you can get away with a single stretch mod, and it feels really comfy. And you don't even need prime sure-footed. If you've used your 3 and you've linked to somebody, and you're standing on your carpet, and on the ground, you're not CCable. So prime sure-footed is just sort of a guarantee. So the thing with Nidus is that he's supposed to be tanky. So when, and part of the conversation that I had with this other player was they couldn't keep their ammo economy up, and they didn't like how spammy Nidus had to be to keep their kill rate up, and especially with modern builds where you have like the Archiplasmor, you have people with Zars running around, Tonkors. To be honest, I'm one of the Tonkor people. This build goes a long way with Larva Burst. And I changed builds for those that are just listening. It's a 280 range Nidus. I haven't done any efficiency or duration, so the 200 is from the Invigoration. And this goes a long way as well, because the range goes to 33.6. So I've got overextended, stretch, and reach, and cunning drift. Cunning drift is obviously a flex slot, right? The 15 range doesn't matter too much. But the difference is it allows you to move significantly faster. Once you get stacks, you're good to go. You just group enemies. Double tap and recast. Hit them with a 1. You're running flow. Double tap and recast. Kill a couple of them. Double tap and recast. You know, and that's sort of your gameplay. Is you run through, you'll throw this into the room that you're running into. CC them that way. And if you need to stop, again, group. It's sort of how you play. As you're going into a room, you'll throw your 2 out. It'll drag everything. Hit them with a 1 real quick. So a 2... and then a quick 3 to get your energy back. And even with the range, you're not worried about spamability ever. I've seen the builds. You've seen the builds. My mother has seen the builds. Jesus has seen the builds of people complaining about Nidus, where you run like a shorter range or pull enemies up against the wall to be able to build stacks faster. The change to the augment makes this a 0 issue. 2 casts on, and look at that tether range, good lord. 2 casts with that augment and enough power strength to occasionally trigger the double stack twice, which with the triple Umbra set puts you at like, what, 15% or something? It's pretty generous. Is enough to give you max stacks in very quick order. So one of the things you can do... Alright, let's pause enemies. We'll kill. So one of the things that makes it so fast, right, is you cast your 2. Any enemy that dies while attached to this has the chance of giving you a stack. 1, enemy you hit by that obviously gives you a stack. 4, spawns little maggots. Up here we go. These dudes. Isn't he cute? There he goes. Oh, he's so angry. If they explode, they give you a stack. Only in the tooltip, and I had to look where it was, only in the tooltip does it mention. So you see this guy with a bunch on. When they explode, they deal blast damage. When they explode, they also give you a stack. But they deal stacks in a range, right? So the enemies are vacuumed up. There's maggots attached to these guys. When you hit your 1, it causes the maggots to explode in an AoE. But since you've grouped enemies together, the AoE hits everything in the 2. So each enemy, plus the virulence stack, the 1 going through everything, gives you stacks. The AoE from the maggots hitting all the enemies in the 2 gives you stacks. Standing on your 4 gives you the chance to trigger extra stacks with the augment. I don't have it now. So all of these things work together where you can easily gain 15 stacks in 5 seconds. It literally just takes... Right? Your 4 should always be up. Tether that nerd. Hit somebody. And 1 more. And that should be 100 stacks. Which is going to be 15, 20 seconds of iframes. And then on top of all of that, if you know you're doing like a way longer run, we'll get rid of adaptation and put rolling guard on. There's nothing wrong with that. Tailor your build to the content that you're doing. Especially if you like Nidus. Because builds really matter on this guy. Because there's... Okay, so let's talk about the builds. But that's how you get stacks. So somebody complaining, oh, you can't get stacks on Nidus. It's literally only an issue at the beginning. It's literally only an issue at the beginning. And even with like... And it's part of the reason why people run super high power strength. Even like blind rage, and they won't even run efficiency. Is because frankly, he doesn't need it. Negative efficiency doesn't hurt your 3 and your 4. Because they don't use energy to begin with. And the only reason why I'm running primed flow on this is because it's so spam heavy with the larva. Once you get it charged up, it's what? 25 into 530 energy. That's 21 casts of this. And if you cast this and then hit the enemies with a 1, you basically get the energy back. You'll fill most of your energy pool with like 1 or 2 casts. Because you'll be hitting so many enemies because you're going to gain the scaling, the number of enemies you're going to be able to group from range. So there's ways to deal with this. This build is obviously tuned a little bit more. And also dealing with the Umbral Forma that I have in. This was a Plague Star build. So hopefully this makes a little more sense. Obviously, if you've done Plague Star, you know about the portion where you have to kill the enemies to bring out the boss. So the 280 range, this was putting in work. So you would just group them 1, and constantly recast your 2 to speed kill them. Because it's a big open field, right? And Larva Burst, the big thing about Larva Burst, and it's one of the complaints that I've heard, is the 2... It's really annoying to deal with the 2 because if an enemy gets pulled behind a wall, and it's true, when an enemy gets pulled behind a wall, but the 2, your larva, has grabbed them, it won't deactivate the 2. And with Larva Burst, it allows you to immediately recast and group enemies again. So it's not a true min-max build. And also the toxin damage, food for thought, does react favorably with Archon continuity. It does apply the corrosive effect. So if you're constantly recasting it, you're getting multiple corrosive stacks because each time you explode it, it applies a new scaled toxin damage because the area damage on larva scales with the number of enemies that you grab, right? So it's doing damage. It'll take you well through the star chart into Steel Path. And I've tried the continuity build where I use the Archon continuity to add effective damage. And even with corrosive projection and 10 stacks of corrosive, you're still able to kill even though you're dealing toxin dots, right? So this is another option of a build. You also have... It's not this Nidus. No. Oh, this was the one I used in the other video. You also have... Actually, let's just remove everything. Buffer Nidus, which is kind of a meme. But it works. You have... You'll do that for some to be able to manage your stacks, but you'll just go literally straight strength. So transient fortitude, range, blind rage, intensify, and I guess you could do Archon intensify now, right? Flow. Duration. And you would do a standard dump stat where it's max strength, max duration. And to be honest, it's really just max strength. Narrow mind is just to make the build work a little bit better. Because there are plenty of abilities that carry snapshot instance bonuses. And this is abusing the parasitic link damage increase and strength increase can be extremely potent under specific circumstances. So you have to be able to sort of survive a little bit. But really, I'm not going to lie, you're there basically to cast your 3 and then to die. You just need to be able to get your... you'll cast your Ravenous, and you'll try to pick up stacks off your maggots, right? So you'll run full strength. And whatever aura helps your team out. Exilus, you're not going to be casting... You're not going to have your 3 active too much because you're basically there for instance damage, right? So this is the core thing. Get your strength as high as possible. Because the reason being is, say, like Wisp motes. If you link with a Wisp that's trying to drop their motes, you will boost Wisp's power strength, their modded power strength, by whatever your strength is. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It's a percentage. So you'll link, press your 3 on Wisp. The Wisp will drop their motes, and then you'll unlink and continue the mission. So this is a very glass cannon build, but these are mods that you would kind of need. You can swap out narrow-minded and do some utility where you actually add like health and whatnot. Because you only need the instanced strength bonus. But there are plenty of circumstances where, like, Avara Wisp, where the crit damage bonus from Avara can be boosted by Nidus. So Nidus would get a couple of stacks. He would link with Avara. She would do, with her crit augment, for her tether, it's instanced. So once it's up, it just applies. So you would do that, and then you would link with a Wisp. You guys would boost your power strength as much as possible, and Wisp would drop their motes. You would also have, say, like a Grendel, Nourish, and you could boost Grendel's toxin damage. You also have, I think Mesa's regulators are still snapshot. I know they were working on it because the Toxis used to work, the dual Toxis. I don't think that's the case anymore. So don't quote me on Mesa. But there's plenty of abilities that are snapshot abilities where you can boost the crap out of them for like an instant. They can cast the ability and you unlink with them. Rhino Roar. Probably the most important one. You get a ton of power strength on Nidus. Get a ton of power strength on Rhino. Nidus links with Rhino, where Nidus has all of their power strength bonus, applies it to Rhino. Then Rhino presses his roar, and it boosts the roar. So one of the ways you can abuse that is in Fissures. When you get the strength bonus on, say, a Wisp, Wisp will get a strength bonus to the frame. Nidus will get a strength bonus to the frame, doubling your effective strength, right? Well, this gets counted in on Parasitic Link. And Wisp's power strength increase applies and is what's get multiplied and counts toward Parasitic Link. So it's not like a regular 2x multiplier. It genuinely increases Wisp's strength. So if you're doing the Wisp Nidus thing, which you should at least try once, pardon, you would wait for the Fissure buff. Nidus would link with Wisp, make sure all of the strength conditionals are up, right? Nidus would link with Wisp, and if both of them have power strength bonuses, like frame buffs, then Wisp would re-drop the motes. And it'll shoot you up to something insane. I forget what the... What is it, like a 800% bonus or something like that? You can get it really high. So there are ways even to like infinitely stack. Oh, another one. I forget which element it is. But the Chroma ability that gives you HP is a snapshot ability. So Nidus can link with Chroma, boost Chroma's strength, which would shoot Chroma's ability strength through the roof. So food for thought on that. There's ways to make it work. And even a Nidus can boost another Nidus, and it gets kind of silly, especially if they all have frame buffs. Take a Wisp and double Nidus and boost. It gets pretty gross. Especially when you add in like an Equinox, which is another power strength increase, right? But anyway, so this is an important, though very niche utility because of how it interacts with snapshot abilities, mainly. This can also work with, say, like a Mirage. Most of the time, you will see like a buffer Rhino, but the buffer Nidus for ability strength in combination with Rhino is multiplicative almost. Actually, it is multiplicative. So if Nidus buffs the Rhino, Rhino roars, and then Nidus buffs the damage dealing frame, and then the damage dealing frame just stays near Nidus casting their damage ability. Even a Volt can be hitting like 150k on an electric tick on a Volt 4. Like it's most frames at this point will easily be level capable with their abilities. So the damage multiplier gets pretty insane. And also you have things like Breach Surge, the strength affects breach surge. So the multiplier gets pretty insane pretty quickly, especially when you account for a Nidus, because it's literally a strength multiplier, and you can remove the tether and you can proc things in like a sequence. If you're doing a meme build where you actually want to do damage or with your abilities, or you want to do say like a camp build, one of the things you can do as part of like a proper camp team, and I know Ionti. If you don't know, I'll post a link to his channel in the info. He's in the clan and alliance, and he did a video on the Chinese method of farming, like AFK farming, and the method they used was a Nidus, Avara, and a Wisp. And everybody stayed on the Dashmar, and Avara had the augment, but they used Nidus to boost the power strength of their abilities. Another thing that could also help is, say, like for the meme builds for Mesa. One second. Is Mesa has the current augment that gives crit chance. Nidus can boost Mesa's power strength to something insane. So instead of actually having to use regulators, Mesa can just cast her augment, her ability with her augment, the Shatter Shield, and just shoot out a Sea-Doo and wipe level cap enemies. It's silly. So buffer Nidus is something that isn't very popular because Rhino is generally enough. But Nidus gives you way more flexibility when you're working with a group in terms of like buffing one frame, then buffing the next. When you can take advantage of things being done in a sequence, Nidus is the go-to for a reason for these things. But obviously, just for ease of use and obviously survivability, Nidus will go down and can't really run around like they want to, and especially as easily as a Rhino could. So, but the utility buffer Nidus is definitely a tool you want in your toolkit for those niche uses, especially if somebody else is running a Rhino. So, food for thought. This is the other one. So we have our tank build, we have our range build, we have the buffer build, and the range build and the speed build, if you will, are essentially the same thing, except you add natural talent and some move speed. Because the faster you can move, the less accurate the enemy is. And as long as you have enough range to be more than 30 meters, you can easily yoink an entire room into one spot. And you can just, if you have a strong enough primary, you run the crit chance augment for the one, teaming virulence, and this will almost guarantee whatever you hit them with will wipe whatever the room is. Because they're all grouped together. If you have an AoE weapon, those AoE stack. It just multiplies your damage even further. So this is generally how it would be, and you just run a rolling guard. So let's go over... that's enough for the abilities, but you can see how to gain stacks fast. The strength, or the survival build is my favorite, obviously. There are very few things in Warframe that are as fun as 4 Niduses doing a level cap survival together. Because it's just, there's so much going on, it's not a boring time. So, food for thought on this, but Insatiable is an incredibly good quality of life augment. And I did Forma on the augment slot to be able to constantly fit this. So for even most of the builds, unless I'm doing like a range build where I'm grouping enemies as like a utility frame, I still generally run this. And this is just a comfy build to be able to run around the star chart. As long as you can get your stacks at the beginning, you're good for the rest of the mission. And you can sort of cheese that by using Operator and Magus Lockdown. Magus lockdown, line up a couple enemies, throw out a 1, you got your first couple of stacks, right? So this is the comfy build. Range build is this. And the buffer build was the other one, just as much power strength as possible, and duration when you can. And a little bit of health and armor for some survivability, right? So food for thought on these. So let's go to the Hema, because this was a requested one. The build is surprisingly straightforward. I messed around with a little bit. I just went corrosive and hunter munitions. It gives you viral corrosive on the weapon. If you don't have... I rolled this Riven a couple of times. I had one sitting there. I didn't have any rolls on it. And I got electricity, faction damage to Grineer, and base damage. And Galva Aptitude is multiplicative. So even though this is an old weapon, maybe... I've noticed that the multiplicative nature of the Aptitude mod tends to favor older weapons a little bit. Maybe this is like a new way of adding in like non-Riven benefits to older weapons. I haven't noticed. Maybe I need to start testing for it, but I haven't noticed like weapons changing from additive to multiplicative, and maybe I need to start paying attention to that. But the build is pretty straightforward. I would say if you don't have a Riven, which would make sense because it's the Hema, not having a Riven for it, just do corrosive. Right, 260/60s, 100 munitions. If you don't care about the fire rate, I like the fire rate and the punch through. Helps amp the damage. This is a very middle of the road build. Even with the low crit chance, I liked having the crit on it, because the crit multiplier is okay, right? And the 100 munitions still gives you an aptitude stack, right? And this did fine against, I think it was like 250s. So I didn't get up into the way higher levels, but like killing enemies with Overguard wasn't an issue. Obviously stacks at the beginning. Keeping health up with Nidus isn't an issue. Alright, first stack. Yeah, the weapon gets pretty nasty pretty quick, so maybe you would want some like base damage, just to give it some more utility. Yeah, it's not bad. I don't find it as effective as the Synapse. But the fact that it doesn't use ammo, I feel it saves you a Forma. Because you can just run an unranked Vigilante supplies. Projectile speed would also help you, because you don't have to worry about the ammo. Just make sure to get those headshots for the HP recovery, right? So I feel like this saves you a Forma. Obviously, I put a couple in so I could get the Riven on. But this just feels like a very straightforward, effective weapon. But using the Galv Chamber, Galv's Aptitude, Primary Merciless, it feels like a very appropriate status weapon. So Corrosive Viral, just weight more toward Corrosive against the Grineer, obviously. And I went with Prime Shred if you don't have that. Vigilante Fervor, obviously, if you don't have that. Speed Trigger. If you have something like Arcane Acceleration, go with the Faction mod. So for alternatives. Even like the 30% one will be worth it for the slash procs, right? Obviously not as good as a Prime one. So food for thought in terms of alternatives. And if you have the Arcane Acceleration, you would get rid of the fire rate completely and add faction. So that's how you would scale that. Pretty straightforward. But Prime Shred puts in work, and especially with the effective DPS increase when hitting multiple enemies, it feels really good. But I did do this because it has faction built into it, so it's a really solid +3. Obviously not anything to write home about. Not the best scaling, but it saves me a mod spot. Gives me faction. Technically, it gives me 2 slots because the electricity from Jolt and the faction damage. So a mod saving +3. It's wonderful. Okay, let's go to the next one. Pox. Very straightforward build. Obviously non-crit. I did leave Galvanized Shot on here because the direct hit is affected by this. Obviously, the AoE is not. Diffusion, because it kills. Even though it's a very low damage weapon, you gain stacks so fast on the heat. Hold on. Yeah, something like this. Because you gain stacks so fast that... Sorry, I had my corrosive waiting off. This actually ends up doing damage pretty quickly. And especially with Cascadia Flare. I hadn't tried it with Cascadia Flare. This stacks so fast. It's basically permanently at 480. So until like there's another like hidden mechanic, especially since Merciless doesn't give you ammo now, I don't see a reason not to run Flare. Just by process of elimination, everything else goes away. 1% crit chance, 2x crit multiplier. Maybe if you want to do like a Harrow meme build with it, maybe consider doing crit damage. But literally modding for crit chance is a waste of a mod space. So we just doubled down on everything else. Double 60/60s with a primed heated charge. So heat procs more often, the waiting. And the 60/60s for corrosive. We didn't go viral because Panzers are viral, so we get to mod corrosive for free. Just wait it so the heat procs more. And galvanized shot, lethal torrent, just to give us more multi-shot. Galvanized diffusion, and prime pistol ammo, because we're not going to be able to take advantage of having a large ammo pool to mutate our stacks up better. So the primed ammo mutations are kind of the default now, especially on pistols, because there's nothing like a vigilante supplies, right? But the +92 gives you half your ammo max almost. What is that, 7? 8? And your max ammo is 20. So rivenless setup, faction damage, corrosive, it's going to help deal with the armor. Heat is going to be our scaling, and obviously helps deal with the armor. Fulmination to just make the AoE tick a little nicer on more enemies. Lethal torrent to get our damage out faster, and obviously more multi-shot. So pretty straightforward. It's used as a primer, though it still will kill, especially in Steel Path. Hirudo, I am genuinely surprised. When Nidus Prime came out, I was able to mentally justify the Pox not getting a Prime. Because it's a status weapon, like what are you going to do? Buff the status, buff the base damage? There isn't too much interesting that you could do. Like maybe an interesting mechanic with like maybe an alt fire or something you could add. But in terms of like uniqueness, I am genuinely surprised the Hirudo, even though it wasn't part of Nidus's release, it didn't get a Prime or the Hema. Right? I forget what Nidus's signature weapons were, but I was kind of hoping the Hirudo would get some version to get like a full infested Prime set, because that just seems really cool to me. This is a very straightforward build. It's a crit weapon. Status isn't great, but we're going to keep weeping on it, so through large number averages, multiple hits, we can still get statuses applied. It's 11x or 11% status chance. So even with weeping, it's not going to get us to 100%, because that's 18% for weeping to get you to 100%. Everything else is one mod for each stat. Conditioned overloads or base damage. One for crit damage, organ shatter, berserker fury. You can obviously slot regular fury, or even quickening if you want. Blood rush, obviously, to take advantage of that sweet 30%. We did 2 base flat mods, no status for corrosive, and prime reach. It's a very basic build. And my Riven, when I do run it, is actually range and faction damage to Grenier, just to get that damage a little bit higher. And I'd get rid of Fury, run Strike on the frame, and run a 60/60 mod for corrosive. So, or for electricity, so I can keep the Prime Fever Strike, obviously, because that's the more valuable scaling. So very basic build, and whatever sparring stance you feel comfortable with. They're both good. Neither of them are like awesome. So literally to taste, whatever you want, right? But it's a very good raw damage weapon. Heavily weighted puncture. There is no Riven that is worth rolling to even attempt to turn this into a slash weapon. It doesn't have the status chance, so like you would literally need a Riven with like 100-something strength or 100-something weighting to slash. Your negative would have to be puncture, and you would have to mod for slash in a mod slot. So like, what is it? The Carnus mod? Carnus Mandible. And it would need status chance on it to even think about it. So don't even just go flat damage. Just meme on them with corrosive. Just raw damage them down. It still does damage. Maybe worry about the combo duration. If you're missing one of these, or you have a Riven that like gives you corrosive, you could definitely run Drifting Contact. Unless you want to run like Dexterity, the Dexterity Arcane on the pistol, but considering it's the Pox and you want the heat scaling, I wouldn't run that either. So it's up to you. You could also go like a Matter or something, especially if you're doing Nidus. You got some flexibility and the focus school. Obviously, there's some stuff that benefits him better, but if you're gaining utility from something, that actually increases your damage, go with that, right? Or sorry, Naramon. Why did I say Matter? But anyway, those are the builds. You do not need to worry about energy management. If you are running out of energy, you are spamming his abilities too much. So say like on the Zeraman, for example, talking about playstyle. You would run from area to area. You would try to get there as fast as possible. You would use Operator or something like that. Go to the next area. Magus lock down enemies. Warp in your frame, transfer back, right? Hit 4. Get your AoE up. Group them with your 2 and immediately start stacking. Link with something. The cool thing about the link, as frustrating as Overguard enemies can be, especially because they feel like they've been buffed, or maybe they fixed the scaling a little bit, is say the Thrax, for example. Even though you can't CC them, his 3, Nidus's 3, still will transfer the damage through the damage link of his 3 to a Thrax enemy. So when you jump into a new area, you will link with an overguarded enemy, and all of the damage will go to that enemy and get rid of their overguard that way. With Cascade, obviously it's basically point defense node after point defense. You would just link with an enemy that's super annoying, and preferably has overguard. And you would do it that way. The ideal, honestly, would be to find an enemy that's next to a Guardian Eximus and try not to kill the Guardian Eximus and use the damage reduction aura on the Guardian Eximus to keep the enemy that you've linked with alive longer. It doesn't help your own damage reduction, but it makes the enemy that you linked with significantly more tanky. Obviously, that's ideal situation. It's not something you can always plan around. But if you notice that and there's an enemy right next to a Guardian Eximus, do that, and it makes them last a lot longer. Especially when that damage starts getting way higher at, like, say, toward level cap. Like, I haven't taken Nidus to level cap, but I've gotten him, like, into the couple of thousands. I think I got him up to, like, 1,500. Even with your damage reduction and the damage redirection and adaptation and all the armor, you can still, in some circumstances, if you don't link with the correct enemy, like say like a trash mob, you link with a trash mob, they can get one shot. Just because there's so much damage being done to you. Especially if you get hit with something by like a bombard or something, right? So if you can link with a Guardian, it makes them last way longer. And also another trick to make Nidus last significantly longer is Ancient Healer Specters. There's a reason I have 200 of these guys. I think I actually have 800. Is these guys have the damage reduction aura and status immunity. So if you're having trouble keeping Nidus's energy and health up, if you're doing a camp survival, you can continually vacuum in the enemies. You can vacuum in the enemies and try to keep the ancient healer alive. Put yourself between the ancient healer and the enemies. And this guy will give you an additional 90% damage reduction and status immunity. So with the 3, you have your armor, which gives you 80% damage reduction. Then you have adaptation, which gives you 90% damage reduction. You have parasitic link, which gives you 90% damage redirection, which in terms of like how much damage you're taking to your health pool, between parasitic link and adaptation, you're at 99% damage reduction. With the armor, you're at 99.8% damage reduction. And then you take the entire thing, and then you reduce it by another 90% because of the ancient healer and the status effect. So you're at 99.98% damage reduction. And this method is traditionally how Nidus gets to level cap tankiness. It allows him, with his old health pool, not with this invigorated health pool, to face tank enemies and survive reasonably off his 4 and just the passive. So there's a ton of damage reduction on this frame, even though he's health gated. But the trick is to obviously keep your stacks up. So this is sort of the method. Oh, and then Guardian on top of it, which further boosts your armor, right? So food for thought, my case for Nidus, there you go. And obviously, I'm a big fan of the Infested set. I'm honestly surprised. I haven't messed around with the Hama since the Galv mods came out. It was really nice to see. And obviously sucks your blood, and you can hear it. The little heartbeat's kind of cool. Having, obviously, HP regen on Nidus isn't a bad thing. Especially free HP regen. And the hirudo gives you HP regen also. Or not HP regen, it gives you HP max health. So, those things working together, it's not unwelcome if you can take advantage of them. So, food for thought, there's my case. I'm going to end this video because it's about to be an hour long. But anyway, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Family first. Don't be playing games if you got people over at your house. I was getting knocked on the door because I gotta go because of Thanksgiving dinner at 1 p.m. But anyway, have a blessed day, guys. Happy holidays if I don't hear from you or see you guys. Take it easy.